Hello my dear students. So we have already discussed what pollination is. The depositing of mature pollens on the stigma of a flower of the same species. So under that we discussed two types of pollination, self-pollination. If the pollens of a flower is deposited on the stigma of the same flower, we call it self-pollination. But if the pollens of the flower is deposited on the stigma of another flower belonging to the same tree, same plant or a plant of the same species, then we call it cross-pollination. And you all know when there is cross-pollination, there are chances of mixing of characteristics. Therefore, new species can be produced. Therefore, the cross-pollination method is more preferred. And we discuss some of the adaptations shown by plants in order to prevent self-pollination. So now, for the cross-pollination to occur, we need a medium. That is what we call as the agents of pollination. So, factors that contribute the pollination of flowers are known as agents of pollination. Factors that help to carry out pollination or factors that contribute the pollination of flowers are known as agents of pollination. So, there are three principal factors or agents of pollination. Three principal agents of pollination. That is animals, then there is wind and water. So, animals, especially insects, usually insects can contribute for pollination. Then there is wind and water. So, these are the three agents of pollination. Now, we will discuss them one by one. Animals. Flowers pollinated by animals are referred to as zoophilous flowers. If the flower is pollinated by animals, we call it zoophilous flowers. Among the animals, insects contribute much for pollination. Why? Because the insects come to the flower to drink the nectar. That is like their food. So then there is a high possibility of the insect carrying the pollen with them and depositing it on another flower. So there they help in pollination. So insects contribute much for pollination. Flowers have adaptations to attract insects for the process of pollination. So flowers have many adaptations in order to attract insects so that they will carry out the pollination process. So the first one is flowers having a fragrance. Normally you all smell different flowers. Like that is why even the perfumes are made after flowers. Rose, jasmine, lavender, like that there are different fragrances. Now these fragrances attract the insects. So that is one adaptation. Flowers having a fragrance. Then flowers being large. When the flowers are large, it's visible to the insect. And also insect can come and nicely sit on the flower and drink the nectar. Then the pollens will get attached to the body of the insect. It can be transported to another flower. So the flowers are usually large. Flowers are large. Then there are very colorful flowers that we discussed before also. The petals, corolla, usually they are either white or colored. And I told you all they are of different shapes so that they easily attract the insects or even animals. So there are colorful flowers. Then they have nectaries. The nectaries are the structures that produce nectar. And usually the insects come to drink this nectar. So then again they sit on the flower, the pollens get attached to their body. Then the pollen being sticky, that's very important. When the pollen is sticky, it sticks to the body of insect. Body of insect. So the first few, these few are to attract insects. Having fragrance, being large, Colorful flowers having the nectaries producing nectar, all that to attract the insects. Then the pollen being sticky, it easily sticks to the body of the insect, and stigma also being sticky. Then what happens? Initially the pollen stick to the body of the insect, then they fly to the second flower. When they sit on the second flower, pollen that is attached to the body or sticking to the body of the insect will stick to the stigma of the flower, second flower. So, their stigma being sticky. That is also important. This is to deposit the pollens from insect body. I will write it as insect. So, from the body of the insect, pollen has to deposit on the stigma. Then it has to be sticky. Then stamens and stigma are located in such a way that they are easily contacted with animals. So, the pollen has to stick to the body of the insect. Then from the body of the insect, again the pollen has to stick to the stigma. So, that means stamens and stigma are located in such a way that they are easily contacted with animals. Then only the process will take place efficiently. Flowers having shapes that cheat insects. So, flowers have various shapes. Sometimes the insects think that it is their food, or they get cheated by the flower. They get attracted to the shape of the flower. So, flowers having shapes that cheat insects. That is again another adaptation. So, flowers having a fragrance, flowers being large, colorful flowers having nectaries, pollens being sticky, stigma being sticky. Stamen and stigma are located in such a way that they are easily contacted with animals, and also flowers having shapes that cheat insects. All these are different adaptations of zoophilous flowers. What are zoophilous flowers? Flowers that are pollinated by animals. Zoophilous flowers. If we look at the examples. Now you are familiar with most of these flowers. What are these? The first one is passion fruit. Passion fruit. Then this flower is for winged beans or winged beans. Then we have this flower that is for agati or katurumurunga. Katurumurunga or agati. Agati, and also the last one you can see is Thunbergia. So, this is passion fruit. You can see the colors. You can see dark purple, white, light purple, again white. The shape of the flower, it's large and open, so the insect can sit here. So, here you can see the stigma, it's exposed to the insect. And here on the sides you can see, students, the stamens are also widespread. So, they are also exposed to the insects. So, that again are the adaptations. Then if you look at the wing beans, the different shape to attract the insect, different colors. Then look at the Katurumurunga plant. Again, white color flowers, you can see a different shape. Obviously, insects get attracted. Then we have Thunbergia. Again, different type of adaptations. The shape of the petals, then you can see in the middle, the stigma and all that. So, here you can't see the nectaries or the fragrance and all that, but you can get an idea as to how diverse they are. The color, shape of the petals are different. So, all these are adaptations for zoophilous flowers, and these are the examples. With that, students, I will move on to the next type of agent, that is wind. So, wind. Then we give a name to the flowers pollinated by wind also. We call them anemophilous flowers or aerophilous flowers. So, wind flowers pollinated by wind are referred to as aerophilous or anemophilous flowers. Such flowers usually locate separately as staminate and pistillate flowers. You all know those. Staminate flowers have the male reproductive structure. Pistillate flowers have the female reproductive structures. You all can remember corn, coconut, all these are unisexual flowers. Staminate flowers and pistillate flowers are separate. So, usually they locate separately as staminate and pistillate flowers. Aerophilous flowers show following adaptation for successful pollination. They also have certain adaptations. Aerophilous or anemophilous flowers. Here you can see flowers are born at the apex of the plant. You all know what apex is, shoot apex, the top of the plant. So that it is exposed to wind. When wind is blowing, easily the pollens can flow with the wind. At the same time, when the pollens are flowing with the wind, they can easily get deposited to the stigma as well. So, usually flowers are born at the apex of the plant, at the top of the plant. Then there is a large number of pollens produced. Why? Because it's going to be blown now. If it was an insect, obviously the insect will sit on one flower. Again, it will go and sit on another flower. So, there is high probability of pollination taking place. So, when the wind is blowing, wind can blow in any direction. So, because of that, the chances of the pollens going and being deposited on a stigma is less. So, in order to make sure that they get deposited on the stigma, a very large number of pollens are produced. So, large amount of pollens are produced because they can be lost with the wind. Because they can get lost with the wind. Pollens are very small and light. Why? Because again they have to flow with the wind. So, they have to be small and light. So, easy to flow with the wind. Then we have branched stigma. So, it is branched. There is more chance that the pollens will get tangled with the stigma and they will deposit on the stigma. So, having branched stigma is again an adaptation for aerophilous or anemophilous flowers. Flowers are inflorescence. What are inflorescence? Now, normally if you take shoe flower and all, just one flower. Whereas if you take the coconut or corn flower, you can see the coconut flower here. In one stem, there are branches and many flowers are together. So, that is an inflorescence. So, having many flowers together in one branch of the stem. So, the flowers are clustered on a branch. That is what we call as inflorescence. So, this is a cluster of flowers. Cluster of flowers on a branch. That's inflorescence. So, lot of flowers are there, then more chances for the pollens to deposit on the stigma. So, these are adaptations of aerophilous or anemophilous flowers that are pollinated by wind. Flowers are born at the apex of the plant. Large amount of pollens are produced. Pollens are very small and light. Stigma is branched and flowers are usually inflorescence. So, examples you can see here. So, here you can see, students, this is paddy. Then we have corn. Then there is grass and also coconut. Can you all see all the adaptations? Very tiny pollens. Lot of pollens are produced and all these, the flowers are at the apex of the plant. You can see that here also at the height apex of the plant, and also you can see the inflorescence structures in all these. Most of the adaptations can be seen in these diagrams. But you all know the pollens are very light and small in size and a large number of pollens are produced. That is not visible, but you can see that the flowers are born at the apex of the plant as well as the flowers are inflorescence. So there is a cluster of flowers on a branch. I am sure you all can understand that. So these are the adaptations of flowers that are pollinated by wheat. Paddy, corn, grass and coconut. The aerophilous or anemophilous flowers. Then I will move on to the next agent of pollination, that is water. So water. Flowers pollinated by water are referred to as hydrophilous flowers. So this is the third type. Hydrophilous flowers. Normally hydro is a term referred to water. Such flowers usually locate separately as staminate and pistillate flowers. So same goes for water as well. Staminate and pistillate flowers. So male reproductive structure on one flower, female reproductive structure on another flower. So staminate flowers and pistillate flowers are born separately. When matured staminate flower separates from the plant and floats in water, while floating, it contacts with a pistillate flower and pollination takes place. So here, this is the staminate flower. Staminate flower has the male structure. So that has the pollens, mature pollens in it. So when the pollens are mature, the flower itself, the staminate flower itself detaches from the plant. And here you can see it goes to the surface of water and it floats along the water. So it is the staminate flower that is floating along water. And here you can see another plant where there is a pistillate flower. So that has the stigma. So the pistillate flower is here, the staminate flower is floating. When they come in contact with each other, the pollens from the staminate flower get attached to the or gets deposited to the pistillate flower. So that is how pollination by water takes place in hydrophilous flowers. So there is not much of adaptation here. It is just that the staminate and pistillate flowers are separate, or the male and female structures are separately born on separate flowers. So an example is Vallisneria. Vallisneria. Vallisneria is pollinated by water. So with that, students, I am sure you all can understand the three different agents of pollination. Animals, mainly insects, all their adaptations, we call them zoophilous flowers. Then it is wind, so we call them aerophilous or anemophilous flowers, and all their adaptations. And finally, the hydrophilous flowers, example is Vallisneria, that is pollinated by water. So these are the natural methods of pollination. Depositing of the mature pollen onto the stigma of a flower of the same species. It can be the same flower or a different flower. Same flower means it's self-pollination. But normally self-pollination is avoided and cross-pollination is preferred. So all the adaptations for cross-pollination and how pollination takes place is something that you have already understood. Now, if in a plant pollination does not take place naturally, we can carry out the pollination process. That is known as artificial pollination. With that, I will move on to the next slide. So this is for extra knowledge, artificial pollination. The process of depositing the pollen of a flower artificially on the stigma of the same flower or on the stigma of a different flower of the same species is known as artificial pollination. This can be done with fingers or with a brush. Examples, anthurium and passion fruit. So here, if the pollens do not get deposited naturally by either animals, wind or water, then we need to do the artificial pollination. So what you can do is you can take the staminate flower. If you are using a brush, you touch the pollen grains with the brush. So the pollens will stick to the brush. Then the brush has to be deposited, or with the brush you deposit the pollen onto the stigma. So that can be either done with a brush or even with your fingers. You can touch the staminate flower so the pollens get stick to the finger. Then you can deposit it on the stigma of a pistillate flower. So that is artificial pollination. So this is something that you all need to understand, students. Sometimes even the artificial pollination is done by taking the two flowers and touching if the flowers are close to each other. Here also you can move the flower, the male flower, and touch it with the female flower. That is, if both flowers are born on the same plant, then it is possible. Otherwise, you will have to use your hand or the brush. I am sure you all can understand that. So with that, you all have a good understanding of what pollination is, how the different agents of pollination help to carry out the pollination process. So when the pollens deposit on the stigma only, then fertilization can take place. So that is the next step in the reproduction of plants, that is sexual reproduction of plants. I will move on to the next slide. So fertilization. Fertilization of gametes and formation of seeds and fruits of plants. So that is the next process. I will read the steps of the process first, then I will explain it with the diagram. So pollens are deposited on stigma of the same flower or in another flower of the same species. That is what we call as pollination. So same flower means self-pollination, another flower is cross-pollination. When a pollen grain is deposited on the stigma, so as I mentioned, we can call it as pollen or pollen grain, is deposited on the stigma. It is stimulated by the sugar solution on the stigma and germinates. You all have learned this process before. It was an example for a certain type of movement. Can you all remember that? Yes, it is positive chemotrophic movement. Can you all remember that? Positive chemotropism. Why? It is the sugar solution that attracts the pollen tube to grow. So, the growth of pollen tube is the positive chemotrophic movement. Trophic movement, there is a relationship between the direction of the movement and the stimuli. So, here sugar is a chemical, that is the stimuli, and the pollen tube grows towards the stimuli. So, it is a positive direction. So, it's positive chemotropism or positive chemotrophic movement. Then the pollen tube grows through the style towards the ovule in the ovary. So, it is the pollen tube that is going to grow, and it grows through the style. If you take the structure, you all can remember, students, the female reproductive structure. It's going to be something like this. You have the ovary and the ovules here. So, the pollen deposits there. Then the pollen tube can grow through this into the ovary and here. So, this will be the pollen tube. That is this pink color structure. So, that grows from the pollen tube grows. And through that, now this is going to be a tube-like structure. So, through the tube, the gamete cells will go into the ovary and it will fuse with the ovule. So, there it will be the fertilization process. Once that happens, the ovary will be converted to the fruit and the ovules will become the seeds. That is, the fertilized ovules will become the seed. So, these are the steps of the fertilization process and the formation of seeds and fruits. I told you all I will explain that with the diagram also. So, here we have the diagram, fertilization of gametes and formation of seeds and fruits of plants. So, if you take a plant, this is what will happen. The plant will have the flowers. So, here you can see we have the ovary there. that is the ovary, and here we have the anther in which the pollens are produced. So inside the anther, here you can see anther and stamen. Again here we have the anther and the stamen there. Ovary here, inside the ovary you can see it is the ovules. What is the cell division? It is meiosis. During meiosis, what happens? You all can remember, students. In meiosis, from a diploid cell, that is 2n, you get the haploid cell. That is going to be n. So here you can see inside the ovary and anther, there are the gamete cells produced. That is the pollens and the ovules. So here the ovule is shown to you. These are the pollens or pollen grains. Pollens are haploid cells. N. The same goes for ovule. That is also haploid. That is because of meiosis taking place. So once that happens, now you can see the ovum. Ovum is the cell, the female gamete cell that is going to fuse with the male gamete cell present inside the pollen. So here you can see at the top of the stigma, the pollen grain has been deposited, and due to this chemotrophic movement, you can see the growth of the pollen tube. That is the pollen tube. And through the pollen tube, the gamete cell will be transferred into the ovary. So here again, this is the ovary. So then what happens? Inside the ovary, the fertilization takes place. So what happens there? There is the ovum, that is N haploid, and with that the male gamete fuses, that is also N. So when these two fuse together, we will get the zygote. Zygote will be 2N. Now you all can remember and understand the mitosis and meiosis processes. In meiosis, the number of chromosomes become half, and that takes place during the production of gametes. So here when the gametes are haploid, when they combine, they form the diploid cell again. So that will grow into a plant with diploid number of chromosomes. You all can understand that clearly now. So here this process is what we call as fertilization. Here you can see this is the pollen tube again. This is the ovum inside that has been fertilized. So we have the zygote there. So once the zygote is produced, the ovary becomes the fruit. The fertilized zygote, fertilized ovum becomes the seed. So there the seeds and fruit are produced. There are many changes taking place in the flower. And after the seed is produced, you can see here inside there is the embryo, and you can see the seed with the seed coat, and the embryo will undergo development. It will develop into a plant. That is germination of seed. So here you can see the seeds in a fruit. So this is the fruit with the seeds. That is the fertilized ovules. Then they grow into a new plant, and that plant again starts the reproduction cycle. So is that clear to you all? Production of gametes, that is pollens and ovules inside the pollens inside the stamens and ovules inside the pistils of ovaries of pistils. So there is the meiosis division taking place so that the ovules and the pollens are haploid. So thereafter what happens? It is the process of pollination. After pollens are deposited on the stigma, the pollen tube grows and the gamete cells are taken into the ovary where the gamete cell, male gamete cell, fuses with the ovum. That is the process of fertilization. Fertilized ovum is called the zygote. Then zygote becomes the embryo inside the seed. So seed is the ovule and the ovary becomes the fruit. So here again you can see fruit with seeds and again the process continues. Is that clear to you all? So now the fruit has been produced. All the fruits, if in a tree, if there are about hundreds of fruits, if all the fruits fall down under the same tree and start to grow, will that be favorable or will that be efficient? That is the next question that we need to answer. So here, production of fruits and seeds. So when we say production of fruits and seeds, I told you all there are changes that are taking place. What are these changes? After fertilization, zygote develops to form an embryo. So the zygote, that is the ovum, develops to form an embryo. Ovum, that is the fertilized ovum, is what we call as zygote, that develops to form an embryo. And the flower undergoes several changes after fertilization. The changes I will be writing in this table. So part of the flower and it will become part of the fruit. We will see what happens there. Ovary will become the fruit. Becomes the fruit. Then the wall of the ovary becomes the flesh. Flesh of the fruit, or what we call as the pericarp. Pericarp of the fruit. Then the fertilized ovule becomes the seeds. And wall of ovules become the seed coat, or what you call as testa. And the rest of the flowers, the parts of the flowers, that is the sepals, petals, stamens and stigma, normally they are worn off. They fall down, they are removed from the fruit. So normally these are worn out and fall off the fruit. But in some fruits, now you all have seen brinjals, you all have seen guava, you have seen mangosteen. Now in that, if you look at the fruit, now let's say if we take the mangosteen fruit like that, you would have seen these type of structures. Now these are the parts of the flower. Now the sepals, petals, what they can happen is they can become fleshy even in brinjals. Brinjals also you might have seen this. Now you have the brinjal fruit, the vegetable. So here you have this structure. This is how you normally draw the brinjal. So here these are the either sepals or petals. They become fleshy and remain with the fruit. So examples are mangosteen, then we have brinjals, even in guava and rose apple. So in all these, you have this fleshy structure. So that is either the sepal or the petals. They become fleshy and remain with the fruit. Otherwise, normally they are worn out and they fall off the fruit. They are not there with the fruit. So you have to remember these, students. After fertilization, zygote develops to form the embryo. And the flower undergoes several changes after fertilization. the ovary becomes the fruit. So the wall of the ovary becomes the flesh of the fruit. That is what we call as the pericarp of the fruit. Then the fertilized ovule becomes the seeds. Wall of the ovule becomes the seed coat or the testa. And the sepals, petals, stamens and stigma, usually they are worn off, but sometimes they become fleshy and remain with the fruit. Examples: mangosteen, brinjals, guava and rose apple. So here students, these are the changes that are taking place in the flower after fertilization. So after that, the seeds and fruits are produced. But there are instances where there are fruits without seeds, and that is known as Parthenocarpy. We will discuss what that is. Parthenocarpy. Now when we say Parthenocarpy, process of developing fruits without fertilization. So without the fertilization process taking place, the fruits are produced in the plant. So there the fruits will not have seeds. And artificial growth substances are used to develop fruits in that manner. You are familiar with artificial growth substances. So these are used to induce the development of fruits. And such fruits are always seedless. They are seedless fruits because the seeds are produced only after fertilization. Why? Seeds are the fertilized ovules. So if there is no fertilization, that means there are no seeds. So here we use the artificial growth substances to induce the development of fruit. So always the fruits that are produced by Parthenocarpy will not have seeds, seedless fruits. Examples are shown to you. Here you can see grapes without seeds. Then you can see orange without seeds and even apples without seeds. Normally here in the middle you see those black color seeds. Even in grapes you get those white color seeds. Oranges you would have seen the seeds. You all are familiar with that. But in these three fruits there is no seed. That is because they are produced by Parthenocarpy. So either way, after pollination, fertilization takes place, the flower becomes the fruit or changes occur to the flower and the fruits and seeds are produced. And I said, if the fruits, all the fruits fall under the mother plant and start growing, then there is going to be a problem. What is the problem? Now, if you take a plant like mango tree, that's going to be a very huge tree. And if all the fruits fall under the same tree and if about 20-30 small mango trees start growing under one large tree, then what do you think will happen? There will be a lot of competition. Only limited space is there, limited sunlight. Sunlight is not limited, but they will need to compete to get enough sunlight efficiently. Then there is competition for nutrients, water and all that. Because of that, some of these plants may not survive. And also, they will need to find new habitats so that they can get adapted to new places. So, the evolution will continue, new characteristics are formed. So, for all these to happen, the seeds and fruits have to be taken to a different environment so that they can start growing more efficiently. So that process is what we call as dispersal of fruits and seeds. So with that students, I will finish this chapter and in the next chapter, I will discuss dispersal of fruits and seeds.